Hello friends, my name is Lauren and welcome back to my channel. So as you can already tell as you clicked on this video from the title, I read The School for Good and Evil, the second book in the School for Good and Evil series. It's called The World Without Princes, and overall I think I really enjoyed it. This is a book review on this book, so I will be going over how I rated this book, why I rated it that, some few non-spoilerly thoughts, and then obviously I will have a bigger chunk of the video dedicated to what actually happened in this book because I know so much happened and I have lots to discuss. So first up, I rated this book a 4 out of 5 stars. If you watched my last video, you know I rated the first book a 3 out of 5 stars due to some problematic things and a slow beginning. However, I think this book was a lot better in terms of characters, plot, story structure, pacing, everything I would say was generally better in this book, other than one thing which I'll get into a little bit later because spoilers. I didn't give this book a 5 out of 5 stars because one, it didn't just have that like, oh my god, this is amazing factor. Like, you know how just you have a gut feeling with something, you're like, this is amazing? That didn't come for me for this book, and there was also one problematic thing I didn't really enjoy, so that's why I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars instead of a 5 out of 5 stars or a 3 out of 5 stars. Also, just the overall character development we see in not only the main characters but some of the side characters as well, I thought was really cool to see, and I thought we were lacking that a little bit in the first book, so then to see it almost like made up in the second book I thought was really good, and so overall I think this book deserves a 4 out of 5 stars at least from me. I also thought this book had like a lot more going on than the last book, but I also really enjoyed how it was all tied up really nicely, so if you just keep reading till the end you will find like a conclusion to almost everything that happened in the book. I found all the little like what happens here, who is this, or how can this be solved, all basically comes together in the end, and so I really liked that. However, there's a cliffhanger that will leave you just screaming, so not sure how to help you with that, but if you read the middle, beginning of the book, everything seems to come together and tie well together. So overall, I don't know how else to say this, but I think this book was really well done. 4 to 5 stars for me, and if you enjoyed the first book in the School for Good and Evil and you want to continue, I definitely would recommend it because I thought this book was even better than the first one, so if you already liked the first one, this one I'm sure you will love even more. So that's basically my rating and my non-spoiler thoughts for today. I hope that explained a little bit of my opinion on the book. I overall really liked it. I thought it was well done. I definitely thought it was better than the last book by a bit because it was just overall less stereotypical, and I really did not like that in that first aspect of the book, so I thought in this book I just thought it was a lot better done. Now, warning, we'll be going on to a spoiler section, so if you have not read this book, you should probably pause the video, go read the book, and then come back and click play to watch this part of the video, okay? So after I'm done talking now, there will be spoilers. Make sure to leave now, you've been warned, and go. So if you're watching this part of the video, you have read The School for Good and Evil, or you just don't care about spoilers, one of the two, so we're just gonna jump right in. Last chance to pause it if you don't want to see it, but we will be just talking about everything in this book and why it left me screaming. So just like the last book, I'm gonna be talking about a few different things. I have characters, problematic things, conflict, romance, and then plot, story structure, and then the overall story itself. So let's just jump on in and talk about our two main characters, Agatha and Sophie. Sophie was now the one depending on Agatha to keep her good, and everything Sophie did she tried to do for Agatha, and I definitely think that's some character development for Sophie, as in the last book almost all of her motives were just for herself, her interests, and what she wanted. So I think that's big character development if at least she's trying to be a better friend and a better person overall. I definitely liked her a whole lot more in this book. However, there's also like the idea that Sophie's doing everything for Agatha to keep herself good, which means technically she could be doing it for herself, but I do think that she did care about Agatha a whole lot more in this book, and so I do think that was character development from that standpoint for her, so I definitely think she was a better character in this book rather than the first book. And then also there was that whole ending, which I'll get into a little bit more later, when Sophie called Agatha Agatha instead of Aggie, and then you just know it's all over from there, and Sophie was just so broken at the end after she tried so hard to keep her friend and her together. She let one mistake, not really one mistake, but whatever, one mistake at the end ruin it all, and it was just like, whoa. And then just her ending and how it all happened, I have much more to say later, so keep watching because I will be talking about it, but oh my god. Also tying into Sophie, how she was also Philip. I thought Philip was a cool character, and how we don't really learn much about him because it's essentially just Sophie slightly different, other than the fact that she would actually eat something and not care entirely about how she looked. I do like how the friendship between Tedros and Philip like grew closer, because I definitely think Tedros helped Philip along the way, even though the ending for him and her did not end very well. I definitely think that relationship between them and the fact that Tedros is able to love like a best friend, I thought that relationship was really cool to see, and overall just having the Philip character in the story I thought was really interesting to read about. Then we have Agatha. Agatha convinced herself that Tedros was the one for her, and then spent most of the story trying to convince herself Sophie was the one for her, and then it ended up coming back to Tedros at the end anyways. Once she saw the truth of everything, she knew Tedros was actually her true love all along. I liked Agatha more in this book. She still called out everything that was wrong with the school. She became an overall friendlier person and had actual friends, and just overall grew as a character, and that was just really exciting to see, as we see her from the beginning of the first book where she kind of doesn't care much about anyone besides her mom, her cat, and Sophie, her wearing black, her being scared of everyone, and while many of those things kind of are the same, she has opened up, she has expanded her friend group, she tries more, she sees the bigger picture, and she just overall just wants a happy ending for her, her friend, or Tedros, depending on this part in the story you're at. But her motives always seem to be true and valid, and everything she does as a character seems to be pretty understandable and relatable to as a character. I definitely liked both Sophie and Agatha more in this book rather than the last book, just because we saw so much more character development, as well as just seeing how the relationship was struggling, how they tried to bring it together, and at the end, when it all just goes flying apart, we all know how that ends. Not very good. I just liked the relationship more and everything we got to see between them. Evelyn Satter. Oh my god. So her character I thought was really cool. I did not like her character like at all. I thought she was a horrible person, or she is a horrible person. However, just from like the reading standpoint, I can tell she is a good, well-developed character. I just hate her as a person. She seemed to have strong motives for everything she was doing, and so I really thought that was a good aspect. From that, just having a strong, well-developed character, always good things. And then at the end, how she surprisingly, not very surprisingly, got betrayed by the schoolmaster, I thought was cool to see, but just seeing how such a strong character can become so weak at the end, I thought was very interesting to see that little downfall there at the end. Overall, did I like her? No. Was she a cool character to read about? Yes. I always liked how she was like one step ahead, how she had those butterflies to like spy on everyone, and just how everyone was kind of scared of her, annoyed with her, and didn't know what to do about her. Overall, I would say a great addition to the story. I thought it just kept the like interestingness factor about it alive and really present and there. Also, you know who deserves better? Hort. And also Tristan, but we're going to talk about him first. All Hort wanted to have was to not seem like a loser, have one actual friend, and then to buy his dad a nice coffin. He only wanted a few things, none which are too difficult to get, but he kept being denied it, and he might be like a bad villain character person, but he tries, you know, he just is trying to be the never that he is and just do something for his dad and just be a person that isn't hated by everyone. Like, he deserves a little better. I'm hoping at the end of the third book something happens good for him, because honestly this man has gone through a lot. He just needs a nice happy ending. Also, same with Tristan. We find out Tristan is actually, I think it's how you say it, Yana. We find out that Tristan has been her all along, and then that the schoolmaster tried to recreate the Merlin spell potion thing and how it kind of worked, kind of didn't. But anyways, Tristan just wanted to go to the castle because it was actually nice and no one was fighting all this kind of stuff. I'm like, Tristan, no, you deserve so much better too. And just like these like side characters that you don't expect to take a toll on you, you're like, actually these characters deserve so much more. And they definitely added to the story and definitely like plead with my heart, because I'm like, oh my god, you deserve better. The last character I want to talk about is the schoolmaster. Now, if you watched my last video, you know that I wanted the schoolmaster. I wanted to learn more about him in this book. And then in this book, now I'm like, oh, we gotta wait till the next book, because he's seemingly dead until the very end of this book, or we only get the last 50 pages or so with him actually in it, not learning too much other than the fact that he still wants Sophie to be his never after. So what can we take away from that? Not much, because it's essentially the exact same thing that happened in the last book. So I really just want to know more about him. He's very mysterious as a character, so I'm hoping we get to see more of what he actually is like, more backstory, all that kind of things in the next book. So overall, just my overall thoughts for the character section. I thought overall all the characters were really well developed, or they were just really interesting to read about. I'm really excited to see more about the schoolmaster, and hopefully in the next book we get some kind of explanation on who he is, what he's done, why he wants Sophie specifically, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm hoping. Those are my overall thoughts and overall characters. A+ for me. Moving on to some problematic things. The problematic thing in this book mainly was if you stopped halfway through, just like the last book had a pretty negative talk about girls. With this book, it was more about boys. If you stopped halfway through the book, you would get this horrible messaging about boys. I mean, trying to make all boys your slaves in a middle grade book is not the greatest thing to be talking about, and also just the way they were written, I'm like, okay, I get it's like boys versus girls, but calm down, okay? We don't have to completely trash everyone considering this is a book meant for people 12 years old and younger, so not the greatest thing. That was the main problematic thing that dropped me down a star because I was like, this is bad messaging again. There can always be a little bit of something bad just to add to the story, but once you add too much, it's kind of like you're doing overkill, like this could just be some bad messaging anyways. However, I do think it kind of fit the story. However, just to be like extreme it went, I think pushed it a little too much. Just like the last book, there were so many stereotypes and all that kind of thing, and I just think that if it toned it down a little bit, it would have been a better book. Same thing with this one. If it just toned it down a little bit, I think it would have been a better story, and overall messaging would have been better. Oh, and also the Dean's character, I know this is like part of her character, but she was so mean to the boys. I'm like, oh my god, this is horrible. Like, how can one person be so mean? Like, everything she did just seems so mean. I'm like, are you only driven by your own motives? And the answer is yes. Yes, she is. Something also that I saw is that the overall, almost all the girls in the School for Girls didn't really seem a problem with this. They're like, yeah, no, you're right. And literally a few months before, a few days before, they all like were wanting a prince or just talked with boys. Like, they just changed their opinions so fast, and I'm like, did you really not want them at all in the first place? Or is this just what you've been taught? Like, what happened there? A little bit more explanation with that would have been better, because I just thought everyone changed their opinion so fast after seeming to love all the boys and then being like, they suck. So I don't know what happened there. Then one thing that could have been problematic but wasn't was the rules for good and evil changed the rules for girls and boys. But then, even though they were stereotypical in that, and Agatha called that out, thankfully, I do like how Tedros at the end called out Philip for saying that he wasn't a typical boy, but he was like the best one they've ever seen. He was everything that I should honor and be more like. And so I was like, hey, even though this is in place and it is the rules, people can be however they want to seem and be the best version of themselves. So I do think that you don't have to follow the stereotype to be someone lovable and someone amazing. So I do like that factor. I definitely think Tedros kept that from being problematic in the story. And yeah, my overall just problematic thoughts on the book, I just thought mainly it was just the boys and how they were talked about in like the second quarter of the book. So I definitely think that if that was talked about a little less, or not as like thoroughly bad as it was, I think just drawing it back a bit would have made this story better and just a more enjoyable read, especially for its target demographic, which is 12-year-olds and younger. This book was kind of similar to the last book. The last book's main conflict was between good and evil, and in this book it was now between girls and boys. And just like the last book, I thought it all made sense. Everything was like well developed enough to understand why it was how it was. So I definitely think it made sense from that standpoint, and the conflict overall, just like the battle between them, the external and eternal battle of the characters and overall story, I thought was really well done. So overall, the conflict on that standpoint was really well done. And then for my other conflict that I want to talk about, in my first book review, I talked about the conflict between Sophie and Agatha, but in this book there wasn't as much conflict between Sophie and Agatha until like the very end. However, I do think Agatha was conflicted within herself for most of the book, trying to choose between Sophie and Tedros, pick which one was more of her happy ending or what she truly felt she wanted. It was there throughout almost the entire book, which obviously sucks for her, but it was really cool to read about and see how she battled with her different thoughts and all that kind of stuff. So overall, I would say the conflict in this book was much better than the last conflict in the book. Just it was more well developed, made more sense, and overall was just really well done. Next up, we're talking about romance. Now, this book did not really have a whole lot of romance because the main romance we have is between Agatha and Tedros, and they were like separated for most of the book. There was that part where they went to Agatha went to the schoolmaster's tower and met up with Tedros, and then Sophie ruined the whole thing. But I'd say we get that little part there, and then the end. I definitely think that after the tower part, everything just collapsed, and there was no romance between them until the end, whenever all the truth was unveiled, and how Sophie was actually the reason behind why they were separated in the first place. Definitely just tipping them both towards being like, hey, we're actually perfect for each other. That's amazing. So I definitely think the romance between them, it wasn't as strong in the first book, and then it kind of developed, especially near the end, as they just felt more drawn to each other. I just really liked that aspect of it, and I thought it was well explained and well written, so I definitely think the romance between Agatha and Tedros grew a little bit, even though we didn't see it for a lot of the book. Then at the end was Sophie. This romance isn't as like romancy, like typical romance. She would do anything to see her mom again, and she thought her mom would be her happily ever after, and she seemed to be okay with that in the heat of the moment. Then when she found finds out is she actually brought the schoolmaster back. The schoolmaster essentially asks her to come with him and like basically have this love story, and literally she sounded so broken in the last part of the book. She's like, I don't have my best friend, that she went and chose a boy, I don't have my mom, this is the only person left after literally everyone, her dad, her other family, all that kind of stuff, the only person left that is like willing almost to love her and give her like everything she's wanted, just someone to love and someone to love her back. And so I just was like, wow, this, I don't know how this is gonna go romantically. This, I know that's like the direction it's gonna be going in, but oh my god, I hope it works out for Sophie, but also I don't, because the schoolmaster seems like a horrible guy, and Sophie deserves much, much better. Overall for romance, again, I'm hoping it develops more in the next book just to see how it all lays out in the end. I just really want to see it more dived into and to see what the actual love is, because we kind of don't have that for a lot of the books, so we'll see what happens then. Second to last thing we're talking about today is plot and overall story structure. I really liked the overall plot in this book. I liked everything that essentially happened, like timeline-wise. I liked how Sophie and Agatha thought they were going to be safe and happy together, and how that was kind of flipped on them. I liked how when they got into the woods, it was kind of different than anything we've ever seen before regarding the woods. So I liked how it was kind of almost more like dangerous than we thought it would be, and just all that kind of stuff that happened then. I then also liked how Sophie followed that butterfly. She's like, look, a butterfly, let's go follow it. And then it was actually like Evelyn Satter's butterfly, so I thought that like little foreshadowing there was really cool, just to see more of what's to come. I thought that was really well done. The schools then themselves, I thought boys versus girls, it seemed to be like well developed. Everything made sense on why they were there, and then I thought they like got better and built as the story went on really well. I definitely also think the like keeping you on the edge of your seat and always wanting more part of this book was definitely there. I know so many times I'm like, this is definitely going to bring us to the end. It's definitely going to give us some kind of closure, and then some new event would happen and you'd have to wait more time, and you just don't want to know. It just builds that like anticipation until the end, where everything just falls apart. So I definitely think the book definitely kept you wanting more and keeping you on the edge of your seat for almost the whole book. I also liked then how Tedros was also kind of flipped as a character. Rather than being the one everyone loved and admired, everyone seemed to hate him, treat him poorly, and just all that kind of stuff. It was interesting to see how he dealt with it. He kind of didn't deal with it at all and just kind of accepted it, but whatever. I definitely think that he also kind of grew as a person almost when Philip became his best friend, even though that was Sophie. How he was saying that he's not like a typical boy, but he's like the best one and honors everything we have. I definitely thought that was a good part of his character, just seeing that he's growing out of those like stereotypical ways. I thought that was really good. And then finally, the ending. The ending was very intense. So many things happened. I kept having to like go back pages to like see things if I missed anything, because I was like, whoa, this is so fast paced. That was definitely something that could have happened. And like the action scenes, I felt they kind of went like too fast and weren't very descriptive, so that could have been a little bit more improved on. But the ending was still very intense, and everything kind of got tied up. We saw that Evelyn, we saw her motives and why she was doing everything. The schoolmaster came back, Tedros and Agatha chose each other, and then Sophie was left alone, and then her ending that I've already talked about, oh my god, and then Tedros and Agatha start to disappear. I don't want to know where they're going. I think they're just going back to Sophie and Agatha's town, but because that's what happened in the first book, but I also remember that from the third book, so I know that happens, but just knowing that they're not in that world and how it's going to affect them is going to be very interesting to read in the third book. Overall, again, overall thoughts for this book, just to end this off, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars because I thought the character development was there. The overall characters just became more interesting, and also their like motives were shown more, and everything they did kind of made more sense than it did in the first book, so I thought the characters were really well done. And then also everything with the plot, everything that happened in the story-wise there, I thought was really well done. It just was really interesting. Every new event that happened just wanted to keep you like in the story and kept you wanting more. So overall, I thought this book was really well done, and I would recommend it if you've read the first book in the School for Good and Evil series and want to keep going. Would recommend. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a thumbs up and comment down below if you've read the School for Good and Evil, A World Without Princes. Let me know your thoughts on it, favorite parts, and all that kind of stuff. As I've already said, I thought this book was really good, and I would recommend it if you enjoyed the first book in the series. Anyways, I will see you very soon for another video, and until then, bye.